Now, should you always write practical implications in your journal article? No, actually, and this is where I would disagree with a lot of people that sort of think about practical and policy implications. So I actually did a really quick and dirty study. I asked, it's not really a study, but I asked the people that are on my channel, I did a little poll, and I asked them whether we should have practical implications in your research articles. And virtually almost all of them did that. They said that we should have practical implications. I think it was around like 80%. People said that we should have practical implications, or the stuff that you're researching should have practical implications. But then when I asked them how many people know whether managers actually read the material that they've written, and it was like two people that said that they know managers that have actually written the stuff that they've done. And it's just really uncommon for managers to pick up research articles. And so often it's not, you shouldn't be thinking about that particular audience when you're writing articles. And I'll get into another reason that's a little bit that's a little bit more interesting, I think. So you shouldn't be thinking about that particular audience. You should be thinking about writing to researchers and other people around you, because those researchers are actually going to take that knowledge and maybe teach somebody in the future about what they've learned, and then that will get passed on that way. So that's one mechanism in terms of how this knowledge gets passed through, instead of thinking about just the nitty-gritty practical implications. But the other thing, you have to think about your role as a researcher or as an academic or as a scholar. It might not necessarily be that you should be making changes, right? So if your role as a researcher, as a policy, as somebody that's studying this kind of stuff, if your goal is to make some sort of change, then yeah, you should have policy and practical implications. But rather, if your goal, and you have to think about this differently, is to stretch people's minds and have them think differently about something, then you don't have to think about the practical implications, but rather what you're trying to do is get people to think about things in different ways, and then they themselves will be able to think about this particular situation in the future when they encounter that situation, what they should do, and they might be able to generalize a little bit better if you think about, if you get them to think more broadly in more unique ways than if they are just thinking about this one particular thing. If I just implement this one particular thing, I'm going to be able to do this. But rather, if you're thinking about it as I'm going to teach them how to think broadly or have some novel and different insight about the world, then maybe when they encounter something that is maybe not quite the same thing, but is similar, they'll be able to run with it and actually come up with an implication themselves and what they should do with that scenario. And that's what I think about when I actually write papers. Is I'm thinking about, I want to sort of get people to think about something in a different way. And then it's not my job to get them to actually do a practical implication or do one particular thing, for managers to do this particular thing, but it's my job to get them to think about something differently, such that they themselves will go out and actually encounter and come up with a better implication for what they're trying to do, because they thought differently. They think about the world completely different. They have a mind flip when they read the stuff that I'm trying to write about. And that's really what I'm trying to think about when I'm writing my own papers. And that's why I started out thinking about practical implications, but I've learned not to think about practical implications as much as I do when I'm working on the papers that I'm working on, and I'm trying to think about, well, what's the novel insight? What is different? What is unique? What is interesting with the thing that I'm trying to do? And how is this going to change the way that we currently understand the world?